Hello and welcome to the Illumin Life IdeaCast interview series, episode 7. My guest in this episode is Ora Nadrich. Ora is the founder and president of the Institute for Transformational Thinking and author of Live True, a Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity, named in the 100 Best Mindfulness Books of All Time by Book Authority. She is a certified life coach and mindfulness teacher, specializing in transformational thinking, self-discovery, and mentoring new coaches as they develop their careers. Ora is also a writer for Huffington Post. She's also the author of Says Who: How One Simple Question Can Change the Way You Think Forever. In this episode, we cover Live True and Says Who, as well as her project, her institute, the Institute for Transformational Thinking. I'm recording this introduction after having had the conversation with Ora, and I can tell you it was a great and meaningful exchange, and I invite you to come along and join myself and Ora as we talk about and explore the ideas of mindfulness, present moment thinking, living, being, and a whole lot more. So come along with us, and I hope you enjoy what we created here. Thank you. And welcome, Ora Nadrich. I am so happy to have you on this IdeaCast, and I'm really looking forward to an amazing and informative conversation about both your books and the work you do. So welcome. I'm so grateful to have you on board.
Hi, Justin. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to just go right into our conversation, and I read Live True, and as I said in my introduction, it's an accessible book, it's an informative book, and I think it's good for folks who are just maybe getting started in mindfulness. I've been doing mindfulness seriously maybe for about 10 years, but started as a teenager and didn't take it too seriously. But I think anywhere you are in your path, I think Live True is a wonderful, it's almost like a reference book, because there is this sort of progression through the book where you start out with some very basic ideas and tenets of mindfulness, and then you move into things that go a little bit deeper. So what I'd like to do with Live True in our discussion is just go through each of the 4 parts of Live True, and we'll unpack them one at a time. And I'll start by saying your book came out a little over a year and a half ago, and I think the timing was perfect. You really set it up, because I think for a lot of people, the last year, let's say 2020, has been a bit of a challenging time. And I look at it as times of opportunity and times of being able to move through adversity. And some people call it dark night, so maybe it was a collective dark night, but your book came out at a really good time. So if we could, we'll start with each part. And the first segment of your book, or this part of your book, is called Time. And so would you go into time with us and how it relates to the book?
Sure. So time is the first part of the book, the first section of the chapters, because why not start with time? Really, if you want to talk about mindfulness, which is the practice of being present, the practice of being in the present moment, well, time really does show us how our relationship to time works, in that time is past, present, and future, as we know, or one could possibly think of it as a continuum. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to start with that in the introduction of mindfulness, to really emphasize the value of time, if you will, in that we think of time as periods of time, and we don't really look at time as something that we should maybe focus moment by moment. So again, by working through the practice of present moment awareness, mindfulness, I wanted to emphasize to my reader, time is in the moment right now of which you are in. Time is a moment to moment reality, right? Because time is made up of seconds and moments and weeks and months and years, and time moves very quickly. Mm-hmm. And also that we might not be as cognizant of the valuing of time. And what mindfulness does so beautifully is it makes us more appreciative of the moments that we are in. So therefore, we don't take time for granted. And that's really why I wanted to start the book with a clear understanding of the value of time.
Absolutely. And I think you do an amazing job of helping people to get a good, healthy perspective on what really is the past, the future, and the present, and being present, but seeing the past for what it is, and appreciating the future for what it is, which is nothing but a series of probable outcomes, one way of looking at it. So I like how that just sort of sets things up for folks to understand what this singularity of the present is really all about.
Yes, I do. I think that also when we come to understand these three time frames, if you will, the past, which is really a time that is come and gone, the present, which is the time that we are most alive in because we are in it right now, and then the future, which is not yet here. And if we can understand our relationship to those three time frames, we can really navigate the life journey in a way that we can be much more mindful, if you will, more conscious of what time means to us. Are we spending too much time in the past and maybe lamenting or trying to redo a time that has come and gone? Or are we anticipating the future of what has not come yet? And a lot of the times we can project a lot of uncertainty and anxiety of what might or could happen. And it's not here yet. Now we can plan for the future, and hope for the best of what the future will offer us. But the time that we spend often the least amount of time in, or the most uncomfortable amount of time in, is the present. Yeah. Because we're so busy worrying about the future, or either busy about lamenting the past.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you hit on a very good point. And maybe this is something, some sage that you could impart on. There's a healthy way to look forward. And so we call it visioning and imagination and sort of seeing possibility in the future. And then there's maybe more shadowy side of that, where again, you're worried about the future and you're worried about like cognitive behavioral therapy, you're catastrophizing the future, you're predicting, all these things that happen. So is there a kind of I hate to say trick because that's tacky, but is there a way through mindfulness and through present moment awareness to keep yourself more leaning in the direction of sort of a light side of seeing the future and how you interact with it, if in a sort of some metaphoric sense? Is there a way that you can condition yourself to move more into that side?
Yes, because what mindfulness does, which again is the practice of being present, it makes us more aware. And when we're more aware, that gives us the ability to be aware of when we're trying to slip out of a moment. And we usually are leaving a moment or being distracted away from the moment because, again, we're anticipating what might or could happen in the future, or we're, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish that didn't happen. Lamenting the past, as I said. So a great way to really just sort of focus on what the mindfulness practice would be is to be aware of when your mind starts to wander. There was a research out of Harvard that states that our mind wanders almost 50% of the time. So where does it go? That's different for all of us, but it makes us realize that the mind is a wanderer. And again, there's nothing wrong with, as I mentioned about anticipating about what could happen in the future. I think lamenting the past is a bit wasteful of one's time because we know we can't undo the past.
Right.
I always love the metaphor of the snake that cannot crawl back into the skin of which it is shed because it actually die. So once you shed the skin, and a new skin grows. And I think, again, to really bring it back to mindfulness, when we are more aware, we're aware of the activity of the mind. So with practice, when you become much more seasoned in the practicing of present moment awareness, you can catch it. Oh, there I go. I'm starting to worry about, what's going to happen tomorrow, or
Okay.
this is making me anxious. And you can bring your focus and awareness back to the present moment to be able to do that emotional regulation that you might need because you are feeling an emotion about the unknown, do you know?
Mm-hmm.
And by bringing your focus and awareness back to the present, you can say, why am I worrying about a time that isn't even here yet?
Mm-hmm.
How present am I in this moment right now? Is this a good moment? Or am I helping make this moment an optimum moment? Because I don't want to waste this moment. This moment is valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a way in which we start to develop and condition and develop good thinking habits, if you will, so that we don't default to those places that really, again, take us out of the moment.
Okay. Okay. So with practice comes that discipline, the mastery of reeling yourself in, because again, as you said, I do it all the time and I try to make it productive, but I have kind of like ADD. I'm all over the place. And, but I do try to know that I only occupy the present. And so, yeah.
Well, occupying the present, Justin, means it's the awareness of the thoughts that you're thinking in the present moment. It's
Right.
being the observer of the activity of the mind. So, in as much as we can show up in the moment, what are the thoughts that are occupying our mind in that moment?
Mm-hmm.
Are they thoughts of negativity? Are they thoughts of fear? Are they thoughts of worry? Are they thoughts of, again, lamenting a time that has come and gone, which is the past? Or am I in the present moment with acceptance, non-judgment, hopefully self-love? I mean, I always think that's the cherry on top. It starts to refine the process of the activity of the mind, and that what I like to refer to as occupying the mind with useful thoughts as opposed to allowing for useless thoughts to dominate the mind in the present. Is this thought helpful? Which really goes to my first book, Says Who, which is a cognitive method that I created for transforming negative and fear-based thoughts, which is a series of 7 questions to really ask yourself when a thought comes up that is either useful or not useful to your well-being. We start to really become much more cognizant of the thoughts that we are harboring and the thoughts that are really useful to our well-being.
And so what I'm taking away is that it would be helpful to, and you just did essentially remind ourselves that even though we can be present, that there's a quality of what's going on in that present moments that can be, say, refined, or even a meta mindfulness of like, what am I thinking about in this moment as I'm present?
Yeah, a metacognition of the thoughts that we hold in our mind at that moment in time.
Okay.
Having a heightened awareness of, and the inquiry, having that, which again, Says Who is about, it's an inquiry, it's a questioning of a thought pops up. Sometimes we have these automatic thoughts that just pop up. And to be able to ask ourselves, is this thought helpful to me? Is this thought useful? Or is one of my Says Who question, does this thought work for me? How is this thought useful to me?
Okay.
Is it really helping me, realize a goal or achieve what I want to achieve? And even something as basic as, does this thought work favorably for how I feel about myself?
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful, because that inquiry can then move to, if you do move forward into thinking a few steps ahead into time, that it's productive and it's a more meaningful, or a more, again, at Shadow Light, it's more in the orientation of beneficial thinking for planning for yourself or visioning something for yourself. It seems like if you can get aligned in that present moment, do the inquiry process, that will make it more.
Exactly. I mean, look, we have a lot of thinking habits that are not favorable. And the mind is a bit of a troublemaker.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's a Buddhist term called monkey mind, which is the restless mind. And if you think of a monkey jumping from branch to branch, tree to tree, the mind can be like that, or leading us like a dog on a leash. And a lot of the sort of the sense of our relationship to our own thinking mind is that the mind is thinking us. We're not thinking these thoughts. And so I feel it sort of separates us from our role in the art of thinking, that we have a say in the matter. We can decide which thoughts we want to really surrender to or be dominated by, if you
Right.
will. Or what I like to say, thoughts that we curate. I think of when you walk into a great exhibit of an artist, those shows are curated. You really see the works of the artist that probably are the best of the artist's work, if you will. So I use that sort of in the same way in which we curate the thoughts in our own mind. We have the ability to pick and choose accordingly to the thoughts that we want to have occupy our mind. And that's sometimes a bit of a very unusual concept for people
Hmm.
because A, they don't question their thoughts, nor do they think they have the ability to pick and choose the thoughts that they want to hold in their mind or believe in. Is
Mm.
this thought a thought that I really want to believe is true? So I really offer up to my readers in my books to know that you are, as I say in Says Who, you are the creator and master of your internal dialogue,
Mm.
which creates your reality. Do you know?
Absolutely. Very wise, very wise. So, in that centering process of present moment awareness, that's sort of an architecture or framework for understanding. Part two of your book moves into a little bit more of a depth of the mind process and the mindfulness process, or the sapience or the cognitive process of the human mind,
Yes,
understanding.
exactly. Because when you really begin with the concept of time, if you will, which is what I explained, when you really can look at the different time forms, past, present, future, and get a sense of the roadmap of time and what that looks like, then you can start to integrate your understanding of your relationship to those time frames, if you
Hmm.
will,
Hmm.
which is why I took the reader from let's take a look at time and now let's understand our relationship to time.
Yeah, absolutely. And in segment two, understanding, you take on some pretty heavy topics, or sort of subjects rather, and things like wholeness and coexistence. Um, and so you're starting with a platform and then you're building up. So talk to me about wholeness and how it can relate to what we were just talking about with the tenses of time.
Well, wholeness is really used in reference to the wholeness of the authentic self. And that's what I really integrate into Live True is I combine mindfulness, present moment awareness with the authentic self.
Mm.
And the reason why I brought those two together, if you will, in this book is because I can say, well, we can show up in a moment, but who is showing up in this moment? Am I showing up in this moment as who I really am? Or am I showing up in this moment because I'm having one of my personas or my identity sort of lead the way here?
Mhm.
And the whole notion of the authentic self, which I say is the true essence of who we are, we can show up in a moment and yes, we adjust, we can morph ourselves, we can please others in those moments in time, but the authentic self sometimes is really shortchanged in the process. So wholeness I use in the context of coming back to the wholeness of the authentic self. There can be this fragmented relationship to, the way in which we compartmentalize parts of ourselves and or things that we've experienced on our life journey, things like trauma, experiences that have really moved us even farther away from the authentic self.
Mhm.
So I say this is a rejoining, a reconnecting, a remembering of the true essence, the authentic self, or could be called Buddha nature. It's the nature of which we are true to who we are when we came into this world.
Mhm.
And we discovered that on the life journey. And early on in the life journey, oftentimes is when the fracture or the fragmenting occurs, when life incidences or circumstances or situations tell us we're not who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens early on in the life journey to many people where the split happens.
Yeah.
And that's when the fractures can happen. That's when the fragmentation starts to happen. And we start to move farther and farther away from the authentic self. And I'm proposing to return back to the wholeness of self, mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah. That fracture you mentioned reminds me of there was a psychotherapist named Jacques Lacan, and he was sort of shadowed. You have Jung behind you, but he wasn't as prominent as Freud and Jung. But he had the mirror stage, and he posited that that's the point at which self-awareness kicks in when a 3-year-old looks in a mirror and sees something there that moves like, that in other words, they're not unitary with, which is a beautiful place to be. They're not oneness anymore. They are a dichotomous creature. And so you mentioned the fractious nature of our persona and our identity and our selfness, the hexaity of who we are. I love that Lacanian. It's there's people in that discipline or go back and forth on it, but it's a wonderful thing to just sort of think about that there is a point in all of our lives, and most of us can't remember, where we sort of divide ourselves into an egoic aspect, and then there's the actual self. And like you said, there's the persona starts to develop, and the character that we play begins to emerge, and there may be multiple characters that we present
Yeah,
to the world.
yes, exactly. Roles, personas, identities. I mean, we have different ways in which we express ourselves, and we might be a certain way at work, but different at home. Do you know? And I think what we want to be mindful of is that the roles in which we play, the roles that we play in life, whether you're a boss by day and then you're a family person at night, we do have a sense of what it means to leave some of that behind in the environment or the milieu which we're functioning in that capacity. If we have to continue to live our lives playing these roles, the authentic self starts to get lost. Do you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Now, you can play a role, you can be a boss, you can be an employer, an employee, and let the true essence of who you are shine out. You don't need to compromise that. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that in whichever way you're expressing yourself, it's not duplicitous, it's not hidden, it's not ambiguous. Do you know? It shouldn't be confused with the role or the identity that you take on, meaning your job, your profession, whatever. I don't want people to think that suddenly you have to be one way a certain time of the day and another way another time of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You can still allow the authentic self to shine through everything that you do.
Mm-hmm. And the practice that you work with and that you teach to others is certainly one of, I would be so bold as to say, one of the better ways of cutting through some of the things that may be so ingrained in us, again, as the altars of ourselves that we present. Sounds like, with the work that you teach, that that's one way to bring yourself back to that authenticity, or at least find yourself and find a grounding or a baseline of what constitutes you in terms of the genuine aspect of who you are. And so I believe a lot of what you work with brings people to that, right?
Yes, and I also really want to say that there is always this place within us that even for people that maybe might say, well, I can't be that in the workplace, what you're describing as my authentic self, meaning that I'd rather be gardening, I'd rather be growing my vegetable garden,
Yeah.
but my day job is that I'm a salesperson or I'm working in a environment that doesn't really let me integrate what I feel when I'm planting my vegetable garden. I understand that people have to work, they have to put food on the table.
Sure.
What I really want to say here is that you want to be aware of if you are continuously compromising the authentic self. Because if you, let's say, can't feel like you do when you're planting your vegetable garden, when you're in your day job, make sure that you circle back to a time in your day or a time in your week, or even if it's the weekend, a time where you are striking that balance of that, the authentic self, the true essence, what really is your happy place, if you will. I think a lot of people will sometimes, I've encountered people saying, I don't even think I know really who my authentic self is. Yes, to quote, Walt Whitman, I am large, I contain multitudes. Do I contradict myself? Yes, I contradict myself. We are large, we contain multitudes. We have many facets and aspects of who we are. We just want to make sure that no matter what we're doing, we're not compromising something in ourselves that's starting to disrupt the spirit. And I think that's why so many people feel something really lost in their life, but they can't put their finger on it. Something's just not quite right. And you don't want to get to a point where, I say in Live True, take your spiritual pulse, get a sense of self, know if you are in alignment with yourself, so that, again, even if you have to live life in a particular way to make ends meet, make sure that you're striking the balance so that other areas of your life you are able to express that authenticity, if you will, of expression and of who you are, and just to be able to just be who you are without having to be on and having to sort of have it always together in a way that people have to see you in a particular way. Right. That's important to strike the balance, Justin, and that's really what I highly recommend to people is, are you living a life in balance?
Much like we always, you hear it a lot in common parlance out there, that there's a work-life balance. So then there's the you balance of giving the you time to be in touch with itself, and then you can be the other. You can have the roles that we all have to play. Essentially, we have to be out there and do things that afford us our livings and so forth. So much like the work-life balance, you can maybe see it that way, that it is the you versus the character balance, maybe.
Right. And another thing that I want to also add to that in the area of practicing mindfulness, that you can take that out into the world. Mindfulness is like an informal meditation. You don't need to connect to self or quiet the mind only when you're in a formal meditation practice, sitting on a yoga mat or a meditation pillow. Mindfulness lets you use this skill out in your day, no matter where you are. And so not only can you have moments where you take a pause, where you take a break. I'm teaching mindfulness in the workplace, because that's oftentimes where we need it the most. And there's many simple mindfulness things we can do throughout the day, connecting to breath, something like noting, being aware when you're starting to feel stressed, that you might, even if you're confined to a desk, that you can do some, silent breathing exercises to yourself, so that you're, again, bringing your focus and awareness back to the present moment. The mindfulness skills are present with you, whether you're in that role identity in your day job. You're able to even then and there connect to self with a mindful awareness of how to be present. So that's something that it can accompany you in your day job, when you leave your job, when you come home. That's not something that has to be turned on and turned off. That's something that can really be with you wherever you are, no matter what you're doing. When I propose striking a balance, I'm saying for the authentic self to make sure you're giving yourself enough time to not have to be on, to not have to be guarded all the time. But mindfulness is a 24/7 practice that you can do anywhere at any time.
I think that's important to note too, because a lot of times you see the caricature of mindfulness, and you have, people in lotus positions with mudras and a lot of formality to it. But as you said, you can be walking your dog. And I remember when I was younger, I was a chef for about 20 years, and I loved going into the dishwashing area after a hard day of work, and I would just wash dishes, and I would zen out so beautifully, because it's a repetitive task, and
Absolutely.
the forebrain could shut down, and I could just kind of get into my more primal system, and just so yeah, I think that's important to note to people.
That's a wonderful thing to bring up, Justin, because those types of activities that we do, everything can be a meditation, even the things that we begrudge. When we are present with it, And it's in that, that Zen saying, chop wood, carry water.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the everything that you're doing, you are present in that of which you were doing. So even like washing dishes, feeling the water on your hands, smelling the soap that's washing the dishes, hearing the sounds of the water on the glass, feeling the warmth or the coldness of the water. This becomes a practice of mindfulness. This becomes present moment awareness.
Right.
Everything we do can become that. And that's the beauty of mindfulness out in the world. It becomes the practice of awareness in all that we do.
So people watching this interview, you see what you have to look forward to is with a little bit of practice and discipline, then it can sort of branch out and become very universal in your life.
Absolutely. I remember, you bring up being a chef and washing dishes. I remember as a young girl, I loved to vacuum. I didn't know why. I wasn't aware that I was, sort of a mindfulness practitioner in the making.
Yeah.
But I used to love the whole, oh, let me go over here and in this corner. And oh, I like the markings that it's making on the carpet. And, really looking at that is this sort of present moment practice of doing what I'm doing and being purely present with what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that whole being in the present, not being distracted, not begrudging being there doing what I'm doing it, but actually finding pleasure in everything that we do.
Yeah, right. I mean, I have a landscaping business, and so same thing. I'm out working with plants, and I can shape plants, I can install plants, and sometimes take things out, and just the end product of what I do, catches me sometimes because I just get in that flow state, and whatever it is I'm doing, I'm just being present with it. And so again, even something as, I call it donkey work, it's just you're out there doing very simple work, but it pays dividends if you can see it beyond just the sort of mechanical thing that you're doing. You can see that there is this repetitive task that kind of frees you of, like you said, being caught up in ruminating and worried about things.
Well, and also really what I'm trying to say here as well is that we begrudge so much of the things that we do. We begrudge going back to time. We really resent and begrudge so much of what we do. And why are we resenting and begrudging so many things that yes, I know there's the minutia and the mundane and the tedious aspects of life, but if we're constantly hurrying along to get out of this moment so that the next moment can be better, then we're not really appreciating the moment that we're in, to do things like mindfully wash dishes, to mindfully eat, to mindfully listen, to mindfully walk. We're so hurrying ourselves along, like, let me get through this moment so I can get to the next moment, when there's so much to be gotten from the moment that you're in right now.
Sure. It's like chasing smoke, I say. You want that next thing, and it's an apparition. It's really not.
We really need to be aware of how we're always hurrying ourselves along in these moments. And as I say, you will never get those moments back.
And I also, and this is just a little bit off topic. It's those things that we chase that we think will be good for us in the future. Some of them are sort of material oriented, and it's consumption. And so again, there is an emptiness in that. I know Buddhism addresses that, and that you think that the next satiation will be it keeps you going, it's a fix, and you move from that experience to experience to experience, in that sense of gratifying what essentially works out to just neuropeptides plugging into certain making you happy. So.
Well, exactly. And if we're always in search of something, or always wanting something to top the moment that we're in right now, then we're always going to be at the effect of desire. We're always going to be at the effect of wanting. And the beauty of acceptance, being in the present moment with acceptance and awareness, is that you start to find your enough in that moment. Suddenly you are sated, you are satisfied, you're not wanting for anything else. You actually are really in the moment, and it is enough. And I find that to be such an exquisite place to be, because this constant churning, this constant wanting, always feeling like there's got to be something more or something better, we're then always going to be at the effect of that, and then we're not going to be satisfied with life.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that really lovely sweet spot when you are in the present moment and you're watching a sunset or you're watching a sunrise. What needs to be topped in that moment?
Yeah.
That's an exquisite moment to be in, and to be in gratitude
Mm-hmm.
for being another day alive in that moment. So your cup starts to really stay more full than empty, if you will.
Right, right. I've definitely found that in my own life. When I was younger, I was a full-fledged hedonist, and I was always chasing, not to excess, but just, living through a sort of more material consumption way of gratifying myself. But in just the last few years of working on myself and being transformational, as you just said, the sublime, the very subtle things, the nuance of life is not missed by me anymore. I am so grateful. I have my moments, but I am so grateful for everything I experience. Even stuff, I tend to appreciate bad things now. And I tend, there are people that can aggravate me, and I say, okay, go through it, be aggravated, do that, but, learn what you're being presented with, and see a better way out, and know that, don't project anything onto that person or the situation. And I'm not a saint about it, but I do try to work to that, because again, that helps you to, I think, have more space available for yourself to, as you said, just be present with the subtlety of life and the absolute amazement that you can have with things that, if you're caught up in a lot of the hysteria of what we do in the modern world, you take for granted. And so it's amazing. So I guess, in other words, to get to a point that it seems counterintuitive, if you are caught up in that sort of materialist consumption type of living, to say, well, why would I want to sit, why would I want to be in the woods, or why would I, why, but there's so much to that. Give it a try.
Yeah, really to learn how to really be appreciative of the moments that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and to, as I say, find your enoughness,
Mm-hmm.
and also to ask ourselves, what do I desire? What do I want? What do I feel I don't have? There's nothing wrong with desiring and wanting other things. But if you're always at the effect of that, if you're always in the constant state of wanting and needing, you need to look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one more thing in understanding, I just slipped that out, is coexistence, the part 2. There's a chapter called Coexistence. If we could touch on that, and then we'll move into the next level in part 3.
Right. Mm.
Which is living, by the way, for those of you watching. We'll get to that in just a moment. So coexistence.
Yes. Excuse me. Coexistence, I wrote that because we really do need to learn how to coexist better.
Mm.
I mean, a lot of the ways in which we step out of the moment is because we are in dynamics, if you will, that don't really allow us to be present in a way that respects someone else's differences than ours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at human behaviors, if you will, and the dynamics in which we participate in, that can be very disruptive to being in the present moment with awareness. So I go into a lot of areas in the book, like, how are we really living? We have to ask ourselves that question first and foremost. It begins with us. What I say is, what I do with my today and what you do with your today. Or I have something called, the compassion challenge. If I am living in a state of compassion and you're living in a state of compassion, then we're going to be able to coexist more mindfully, if you will. And we're going to be able to really share time and space together with a conscious awareness that we coexist together.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the ways in which we can look at the dramas of life. We're billions of people living on this planet, and there's a lot of non-coexistent behaviors that are going on. And mindfulness really asks us to check with ourselves about, how am I existing with myself? How am I being mindful in the ways in which, my actions, my deeds, my behaviors, if I'm checking with myself and I'm able to even live or exist with myself within my own body, with equanimity, with acceptance, with compassion, with kindness, with patience, all these virtues, if I can do that with myself, then I'm more apt at doing it with someone else. So I really felt that coexistence was an important thing to shine a light on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the raise your consciousness challenge that I offer up in the book, that if I'm raising my own consciousness levels, how conscious am I today? Am I really functioning with others? Am I out in the world in a way that I'm being a more present human being? I'm being a more conscious human being. If each of us could do that with ourselves, imagine what a better world this would be. And we would be able to coexist more successfully.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that speaks to me as being a means of ethics. So it is a practice of compassion. There's a sort of a branch of ethics, if you will. Some people who study ethics talk about sort of the oughts and the moral aspect of ethics, and you ought to be doing these things. But one of the philosophers I've recently started following, Schopenhauer, he talks about this more ethics centered or more compassion centered ethics. And so you do right because you can empathize and you have this capacity to understand this interaction between either two people or more, that what you do is impactful in that sense. And so it's not so much of a pushing through morality. It's more that you feel that you know that your actions have consequences, good or bad, and that's a compassionate ethics. And so that's beautiful that you talk about that in Coexistence, because that's what comes up to me, is that that's a good way to practice mindfulness of compassion, and ethics.
Well, yes, because if mindfulness is the practice of being present and aware in a moment, then you become more aware of yourself, again, your actions, your deeds, your behaviors. You become more aware of others, and then you become more aware of the world. It really heightens your awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It optimizes your whole capacity to take in not only your relationship to this life, but the way in which your relationship is to others and out in the world.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that keeps me practicing in ethics is I do think ahead about, like, if I want to do something spiteful, in which I don't, I usually think spiteful things, but if I thought about doing something, I think, well, what are the reverberations of that? What impact do you have on that other person if there is a negative interaction and an exchange that's again not positive? And so if you, again, through that awareness and that mindfulness, you can really assess yourself.
Mindful awareness, and that's why taking that pause. There is that pause before maybe we let those words roll out of our mouth.
Yeah.
Do I really want to say this to this person right now? It's taking responsibility for our words, our actions, our deeds, our behaviors, it really makes us much more responsible human beings, if you will. We don't just act impulsively. We have emotional intelligence. We're aware, we have an awareness, we have the ability to observe. We have the awareness of knowing that what I say and what I do has an effect, a cause and an effect, as we know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. In part 3, you move up another notch, and it's entitled Living, and there's some heavy duty chapters in there that I like, and I'd love to cover some of that. So things like loving and acceptance, we're moving up another level here in part 3.
Well, living, you're living it. That's when you start to really, you're out in the world. It becomes your life. It becomes the way in which you move through life, in those areas, those chapters that I talk about, like love and acceptance and truth and honesty and authenticity and compassion, as we talked about, our purpose, our intentions. I really try to sort of go through the areas in our lives and how we live our life. We're living. How are we living? how are we living in those areas? Who are we in all those areas of our lives that really make up for our day-to-day experiences? And knowing, are we living more mindfully in those areas? So I really wanted to tackle each one of those chapters, if you will, so that we can really understand our relationship again. Who am I in my loving towards others? Who am I as I'm expressing compassion to others in the world with a mindful awareness? And that's when you're really putting in motion. That's when you're really living it out. It's no longer, again, just on the meditation pillow. This is mindfulness out in the world when it's the most challenging. That is when it's the hardest to practice, when we're out with people, when we're stuck in traffic, when we're in dynamics with others and we're triggered, when things don't go our way. Those are the times when we're being tested the most, that we start to apply these skill sets, if you will, and are doing them effectively. We really need to test the waters by rising to the occasion when it's most difficult for us. It's easy to sit on a meditation pillow and chant or do the yoga mudras or feel the bliss. It's all great for that 20 minutes or however long you're meditating for. The hardest part of this is applying it in all the areas of our lives. That's really what I wanted to take a deep dive into, those areas of, let's not make this just a place to escape to. Let's make this a way of life.
Absolutely. And I think that's universal, whether you go to church or synagogue or, however you choose to go into that contemplative 2 hours of the week or whatever, that when you emerge from that experience, that, like you just said, bring it into the world, practice it, walk the walk, and be that. And
that's where you really see it in motion. That's where you're walking your I say, walk your thoughts, walk your mantra, walk your meditation, walk your contemplation. I think it's great to have contemplative practices in the privacy of one's environment. But I really think taking that out into the world is where you can see that you are, from a compassionate, generous of spirit capacity, really then what are you contributing out into the world? What are you doing? I mean, you don't have to come up with the cure for cancer. You can literally just go out into the world, and mindfulness in motion, you are contributing to raising the consciousness on the planet.
Yeah, and doing it with sincerity. And you have a chapter called Truth. And I think we've been talking a lot about truth since the beginning of this conversation. And so if you can be an observer of your sincerity in this and check in, I think, for me anyway, just checking in with the sincerity of what you were just talking about, being that, again, that ambassador, or that walk the walk your truth kind of disposition. And I think sincerity in that is key. The truth that you talk about in the book.
And I want to say that it's a very valuable thing to look at today. The whole idea of truth, because these are challenging times. We've had a very harrowing time of it, if you will. There's a lot of changes going on. So I think that, it's given people the time to reflect, to go within, to really sort of take inventory of what is my truth. How do I want to live my life more truthfully moving forward? And which brings us back to the authentic self.
Absolutely. And that's how part 4, you emerge into part 4. And that, again, it almost comes into this totality of the I-ness. And so
the self-realization.
Okay.
What is the self-realization? What have you come to know of yourself on this journey of self-realization, on this journey of awakening, on this journey of being and becoming? which really is about the inner journey. It's really about going within and taking closer looks at who are we and how are we living our mindfulness out in the world, as we've been talking about. And that you can come to those realizations of self, again, the authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is really the ongoing journey, is the evolution of coming to know oneself more and more. It's like peeling an onion
Mm-hmm.
and going deeper within oneself so that you are awakening more with every discovery, with every new way of coming to know yourself and becoming a more mindful, aware, conscious human being. This is a daily refinement. This is a daily practice. These are daily disciplines, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people might look at it as that it's a lot of work. As someone once said to me, "Oh, Ora, it's so much work to become self-aware." And I said, yes, it is.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
You're so right about that.
Yeah. That's one thing.
It's going to take a little work on your end,
Yeah, who knew, right? I mean, but you know what? I mean, I understand where they're coming from, because we do live in the, last 50 years, it's all been about instant gratification and abundance and consumption. And so we're kind of almost, without throwing rocks at the Madison Avenue and the advertising agencies, but we've almost been programmed to just, everything is,
instant this, instant that, instant
yeah.
gratification, and the self-aware journey, the self-realization journey, is a journey that asks things of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to take yourself on that journey, it's a journey that can have its challenges for sure. I don't want to make it sound like it's just a day in the park every day. It's not.
Yeah. No, it's a journey.
It is a journey, and there are days, you mentioned earlier Carl Jung about, discovering things about ourselves, looking deeper into areas of ourselves, perhaps the shadow, the aspects of ourselves we may not like,
Mm-hmm.
the aspects of ourselves we may want to just push away and deny. When you asked me about wholeness, that's the integration of all aspects of who we are, all
Mm-hmm.
aspects, so that we can come to embrace it. We can come to understand what loving all parts of ourselves looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Not rejecting the parts of ourselves that we may not want to look at. Because as Jung said, if you don't look at that and shine light on your own shadow, you will invariably project it outside of yourself onto
Mm-hmm.
someone else or onto something else. It's a lot easier to throw this off onto other people and not want to look, take a deeper look into the areas of ourselves we might not be so fond of. Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Jung's concept of the individuation is, if people are interested and haven't checked into that, I think that's essential. It's what you just said. It's integrating the shadow, the light, the awareness, and enriching the psyche so that you are more whole. And that's the individuation, at least as I understand it. And that's a beautiful tool, integrated with other disciplines to get into that self-realization or the actualization of moving into awareness and self-realization.
Yes, and the mindful awareness, again, the practice of present moment awareness, is to have the awareness of the understanding of, again, our contradictions, the different aspects of ourselves. And rather than not allowing for them to reveal themselves to us,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't push them away, that's when self-love really does come into play. And that's when acceptance, meaning we are forgiving of the parts of ourselves that need to be more understood, that need to be developed or helped along. And, not to reject those parts of ourselves or not to feel the hatred towards aspects of ourselves, but to really understand that these are parts of ourselves. To become whole, we must learn to accept, we must learn to forgive, we must learn to heal, and we must learn to accept, as I said. Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is that journey, and that's the mastery. And so if somebody's out there listening to this interview and they're struggling, and it's as your client had said, like, this isn't easy, and this isn't happening right now. And it's like, well, a concert pianist, somebody who's classically trained, has spent hours, or somebody who's learned chess, or a golf pro. Some people have it, innate, but a lot of us have to work and work and work. And so when you see somebody doing something incredible, playing a piano or doing ballet or whatever it is that blows your mind, know that there were thousands of hours, unless again they were virtuoso, there were thousands of hours that went in to them presenting you with something incredible and beautiful. And so that might be a good way for someone to say to themselves, if I apply myself, I will be that next, virtuoso, at least of my own expression of who I am and how I interact with the world and present myself to the world.
Absolutely. And the way in which we embrace, the way in which we integrate those different parts of ourselves, when we are really humbled by that, knowing that we're not perfect and that we are constantly in the beautiful flow of being and becoming, constant ebb and flow, we really can feel the wonderful sense of acceptance and that feeling of self-love. And there's great rewards in that, do you know? Where we can understand that we are like the lotus flower emerging from the mud.
Right.
Do you know, we are really coming out of, whether it's out of difficulty, suffering, darkness, dark night of the soul, however you want to describe it, trauma, that each and every day we are emerging out of this darkness. We are emerging out of this suffering, if you will.
Yeah.
And we are becoming anew. To me, that's quite beautiful to know that about this.
Absolutely.
Every day we have this opportunity to replenish, to renew, to be reborn, to go on the transformational journey again and again and again.
Yeah, I know when I went through a period of my life that I would define as the dark night, that it is the greatest teacher and master I ever had. And I thought I had a neurodegenerative condition that was brought about by environmental a situation with mold and so forth. And I had a lot of bad things presenting themselves. And I thought I was going to be in a nursing home at 41 because I was losing my faculties very quickly. A lot of stuff going on. And I thought, well, this is it. I'm done. But I'm a stubborn person. So I worked through it, and I've obviously brought myself back up. But now I look back on it, and it is the greatest gift I could have ever gotten. It was a horrifying 2 or 3 years. And I thought any day that I would just be called off in an ambulance and never be seen again. And because I would just lose it, I just would not be able to recognize things. I couldn't speak. I had Parkinsonism. I mean, it was just really nasty. And it's, it was a great thing to sit in for a while because, it taught me so much about who I am, what's inside of me to bring out in terms of perseverance and resilience to this situation. And I say this mostly if there's anybody listening to this interview, that the dark night, that the tribulation that you may be experiencing is, I'm not going to be trite and say that it's a gift, but it is a teacher, and it is something showing up for you that if you can move through it and you can see it for a teaching aid or a wisdom tool that, or a learning tool, that it can be very beneficial for you. And I don't say that lightly because I suffered for 2 years.
and yes, and so to know that you're in the throes of suffering can be even great suffering, where all sorts of thoughts can enter into the psyche, where suicidal thoughts can come up, or tremendous despair, where you feel like you're groveling on your hands and knees, begging for some kind of light to penetrate you. And knowing that it is a hell for sure that you might be experiencing, but that it's not permanent, because nothing stays the same.
Right.
As a great quote by Greek philosopher Heraclitus, the only constant in life is change. Now, when you're in the throes of great despair, you're not thinking that you're going to get through it. It's easy for someone who's been on the other side of the despair and the suffering to say, you'll get through it. But you have to experience your own rebirth. Do you know? There is your own rebirth that must be experienced when you're in that dark night. Do you know? That's the way in which you birth yourself. And I say birthing for men and women. This is the birthing of self. This is where you emerge. People can call it all sorts of things. It can be their eureka moment. It can be, a come to Jesus moment, aha moment, where something happens,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Jesus
something
is a great.
profound happens.
Oh, absolutely. And saying Jesus, I mean, it's the whole resurrection story. It's the Phoenix. It's, the ascension out of.
Rising from the ashes, for sure. And that is a transcendence. That is a rebirth. That is a renewal, and for those that have come on, to the other side of that, who have survived that, I think everybody who has survived, a dark night or many a dark night. I think St. John of the Cross in his dark night, I think lasted for 40 something years.
Yeah.
But great works of poetry came out of that, know?
Right. Yeah.
So to know that the dark night might seem as though it might never end, all nights end, and a new day is born.
Absolutely. That beautiful emergence. I think this is a wonderful segue to Says Who, to your other book that you wrote in 2015 or was published in 2015. But I want to respectfully close out Live True. And the book is a journey, and it's also a reference book. And as I said in the beginning of the conversation, it doesn't matter where you think you are along your, say, your mindfulness practice or whatever it is you're doing in the world. I think this is a great book in terms of touching base with not only the basics, but into that we've just gone through sort of a transcendent path with this, what we've described in the book. And I think that is a great reminder for people, no matter where you are along your journey of transformation, that this book has a beautiful utility in that regard. So I want to honor that before we move on. And did you have any last things you wanted to say about Live True? Because I do want to give us enough time to not only talk about Says Who, but the practice that you have as well.
I think you covered a lot, Justin. It is the ongoing life journey. Do you know? I mean, the journey doesn't end once you reach the end of the book, as we know. The journey is ongoing for all of us. And what we learn along the way, I mean, I offer up to my readers the practice of mindfulness, to use that as a roadmap on the life journey, and to, not be afraid to go within, because you have to understand what it means to go within so that you can continue the journey without, and it really is a continuum. Every day the journey continues. So I think I really give people this roadmap, if you will. I say, a mindfulness guide is what the subtitle is. Live True, a mindfulness guide to authenticity. And the journey of the authentic self is ongoing. It's a continuous journey till we take our last breath.
Beautiful. Would it be appropriate for you to give us a little taste of, if there's somebody watching this video and they haven't done anything, they may have, mindfulness is, meditation is trending, and it's been, last 5 or 6 years, it's really gotten popular. Would you be up for going through, as long as you feel is appropriate, a mindfulness exercise? And those who are watching, I invite you to join us, and maybe we could just do a little mindfulness exercise before we move into Says Who, which I'm excited to do. But
absolutely. Why don't I just do a little meditation, take one of my meditations from Live True. Okay. And the one I just kind of opened it up. I like to do that. Sort of like the tarot deck, or what card did I pull? Right. So let me guide you on a meditation called Today.
Beautiful.
So to our listeners, you don't have to be anywhere special. All I really ask is that you find a comfortable place that you're sitting in, and to be there, be present, be aware that you're in this moment right now. and to gently close your eyes. Be aware of any thoughts, sounds, feelings, or bodily sensations, and simply observe them, just to have an awareness of that you are here in this moment of now. You're in this body. You might be experiencing different things or hearing things around you. Just observe. There's nothing really else that you need to do. And put your focus and awareness onto your breath. Take a few deep breaths in and out. Let's do another deep breath in and out. And during any meditation, if your mind begins to wander, all you really have to do is just bring your focus and awareness back to your breath. It'll always bring you into the present moment. Say silently to yourself, I am alive today. I am alive today. Say silently, today is all that matters. Today is all that matters. Say silently, I am grateful for today. I am grateful for today. Say silently, I wish to live today to its fullest. I wish to live today to its fullest. Bring your focus now and awareness back to your body. Gently open your eyes.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a little meditation on being in the moment of today, right now. Today is today. We're in this moment and we are living in the time of today.
That was wonderful. Thank you. That was good for me. I hope the people watching the interview, and I call it the experience now, that you had a lovely meditation. So thank you so much for that, Ora. I very much appreciate it. So we were talking a little bit about the dark night and about things that we can emerge from. And I mentioned that might be a good segue for Says Who, because you have a story that you tell about what started you off on your path of sort of a very direct start to what brought you to where you are now. And that was a family incident. It was something that happened very much close to your orbit. And so if you're comfortable sharing that, I'd like to start with that. And then you can give us some insight on the essence of Says Who.
Yes, it was a family tragedy that happened when I was around 15 years old. One of my older sisters, who I just idolized and adored, had a mental breakdown. And, that was what it was called, a nervous breakdown, a mental breakdown. And it was just devastating. And she never was the same again after that. And she was diagnosed with schizophrenia and manic depression. And it was just very traumatizing for me at the time. I was the youngest of 4 siblings, am the youngest of 4 siblings. And I just could not wrap my head around what had happened to her. I couldn't understand how somebody who I just thought, was the greatest person in my life was fine one day, or so it seemed, only to never be the same again. And, being a young woman myself and really coming into my young adult womanhood, if you will, as a 15-year-old, I was going through a lot of changes. And so it was very traumatizing. And I went into fight or flight. And when we go into fight or flight, a lot of thoughts rush to the foreground of our psyches. And I remember as clear as day that the thought that really dominated my mind when that happened to her was, oh my God, if that can happen to her, that can happen to me.
Mm.
So that was a thought that really came to the foreground of my mind. And I buried that thought.
Mm.
And, it's a long story, and I'll sort of try and make it shorter because we'll be on for another hour. But what happened and ended up becoming my book, Says Who, How One Simple Question Can Change the Way You Think Forever. That thought that I buried, I started to feel what I call the side effects or the symptoms of a thought that we don't know is there and that we bury into the subconscious. And the next thing we know, we're at the effect of something and we don't know why. What happened to me is it turned into a type of symptomology, and then I started experiencing anxiety. So I lived my life with anxiety and I didn't know why, because as time passed, I was still very anxious. And it got to the point where it started to really affect my life. I became an actress years later. I had a very promising career ahead of me, but my anxiety was not going away. And it was starting to literally affect the quality of my life. So I knew that I needed help. It took me on a very deep psychospiritual journey, which I am eternally grateful for, because it really is what brought me to where I am today. I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing today were it not for that journey that I had to go on because of something that had happened to my sister. And life works in very mysterious ways that way. I say she was my greatest gift, because what happened to her in her destiny really helped shape mine, if you will.
Yeah.
So went on a very deep psychospiritual journey, learned so much about the workings of the mind. I went into deep learning and studying and getting certified, and also went into Jungian analysis. That's what brought me to the workings of Carl Jung, psychoanalyst Carl Jung. It was divine providence for me to get to that point. So I knew that once I was on that journey, that this journey was going to take me to where I needed to go. It was really my self-realization journey, if you will. And it really was my dark night of the soul. Mm-hmm. It was going through a really hellish time of such deep despair. And I was so longing for the understanding of who are we, what really does go on in the mental state of each and every one of us, that I came to know my purpose. And I wrote Says Who, which was my first book. And it is a cognitive-based method that I created to challenge fear-based and negative thoughts. Well, what it allowed me to do is to circle back to my original thought that caused my anxiety. And if you remember what I said, the thought that I had was, what will happen to my sister will happen to me. Right. That wasn't true. That was a fear-based thought. That was born out of fear. There was nothing to back that thought as true. There was nothing that could prove to me that that was going to happen. It just really shows the power of the mind, and that how we can get gripped by a thought that is born out of fear and can literally change the course of our life. Mm-hmm. So that thought caused me tremendous suffering. Mm-hmm. And when I wrote Says Who, which was based on an incident that I had with a life coaching client, I became a life coach, and I encountered a client that was very taken over by their fear-based thought. And I was able to identify it because of what I had been through, and recognize how crippling these thoughts that are born out of fear can take over our lives. So I came up with this method called the Says Who method, which is a 7 questioning method for challenging negative and fear-based thoughts. And when I worked it with my client, I saw a remarkable transformation in her. And I knew I was onto something. I knew that the Says Who method was life-changing. And I knew that, born out of my own tremendous despair, that I wanted to help people not suffer the way I had suffered. I had no system in place. I was a young girl who had a thought that was born out of fear, and I unfortunately really suffered because I had nowhere to go with that. There was nothing for me to know. I didn't have a system in place.
Mhm.
The book really offers up people a method, a system, these techniques that I've come up with so that you can really question those types of thoughts to
Mm.
find out if they're even real or not, do you know? And that really was the gift that I could offer back, which is the greatest inspiration. Again, the story of my sister that really was the great catalyst for me to write Says Who and to create what I feel is a life-changing method for transformation.
Mm, mm. And there's a double aspect to the emergence process from a tribulation or from a dark night experience, in that, as you said, your sister gave you an incredible gift, and that's one way to look at what that process was. As well, you went through your own dark night by, again, and essentially fortune telling this scenario that could very much happen to you in your mind, but not based on it's more of an irrational thought, I suppose. So you were processing through two different aspects of this tragic event. And thank goodness you emerged with this clarity and this salience for how to work through it. And it was a journey. It was like we were talking about earlier. You don't just have anything handed to you in this regard. It has to be processed and worked through, right?
It is a journey, and that was my particular journey. And when I started to life coach other people, they would come in with their own fear-based thoughts. And what I started to see when I started to, do workshops and do expos, and people would have, coaching sessions with me, that I was really taken by what their beliefs were, and that had helped shape their lives, and that they really were at the effect of thoughts that were not serving their well-being at all and causing them great suffering. And there's 7 questions in Says Who, and the second question of the Says Who method is, have I heard someone say this thought before? Because we are influenced so much by not only our thoughts that we have, but we have to really find out the origin of those beliefs. Where did they come from? So many people who have suffered greatly because something was told to them at some point in their life about them, going back to the authentic self, that made them think very differently about who they are because someone told them who they are. And that's not who they are, do you know? So Says Who really is this method of understanding our own thoughts, to be able to question them, to be able to challenge them, to not accept the thoughts that we tell ourselves so readily, and also to know that we have the ability to transform. I have something called the release and replace technique, to be able to replace a negative thought for its positive counterpart. Again, to be more aware of how we can use our minds effectively and cognitively and neuroscientifically, that there are ways in which we can really have a transformational experience and look at our thoughts very differently than how we most often do, to the detriment of the quality of life for a lot of people. That they tell themselves things, and that can shape your entire life. A lot of what is said to us early on, or I told myself a thought that was born from my own fear, and I carried that thought around for years, and it caused me tremendous suffering. And the ways in which we can ameliorate our suffering by deconstructing a thought that isn't even real, to understand its origin, to understand that it was born out of fear and it's just a thought that we made up in our mind, or it's someone else's thought that they imposed that belief on us and we took it on as real. Yeah. So it's a very, very powerful, I think, method to really, I've worked with so many people that have been so changed by it because they were suffering so much, just like I suffered, in their own way, based on their own fear-based thought, that it has just caused them such unnecessary suffering. And I think that's a thing that really drives me so much through that book every time I talk about it, that there are ways in which we can really find the light in the darkness by understanding our own thinking mind better, and the ways out from the darkness by changing our thoughts.
Very powerful process. And in listening to you talk about how we bring things into filing away from awareness into our memory, it seems that there's a cost benefit ratio with emerging out of childhood, of learning. We wick up a lot of information as young people and merging into adulthood, and there's a price that comes attached to that sometimes, and that is that we take in people around us who are imprinting upon us. Sometimes there's a negative aspect to that, so a dysfunctional parent or a bully or any of these other things.
Right.
These are the things that your book can help sort out, is to again, the process of inquiry is to find out about yourself and touch base with yourself.
When you think of the thoughts, I say in Says Who, we accept our thoughts so readily. We tell ourselves all sorts of things. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be successful. I'm worthless. I'm unlovable. I mean, those thoughts can accompany you for your entire life journey without ever challenging any one of those thoughts. And those become a part of your core beliefs. If we don't challenge the thoughts that we tell ourselves, it's amazing to me that if someone came up to us today and said, you're this and you're this and you're no good and you're useless and you're our instinct would be to defend ourselves. Like, hey, you can't talk to me like that.
Right.
And yet our inner dialogue can be so cruel and so abusive that we just accept it as true. We can tell ourselves the most horrible things about ourselves and just go, oh, okay, I guess that's who I am. To quote the title of my book, Says Who.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. And I laugh because I'm guilty of that. When I do something stupid, oh boy, I tear. But I do it with a sort of sense of humor about it. But because I can then just know that.
I know there's the garden variety types of things we throw at I'm so stupid. I'm such an idiot. Oh, I'm such a fool.
But it goes deeper.
But I'm talking about where it goes deeper, and that one time when Says Who first came out, I did a big expo, the Conscious Life Expo, and I offered up little mini coaching sessions with people where they were lined just around my booth. And it was really very poignant to spend time with total strangers. We had asked them to write down one question, or one thought, I should say, that they have, whether it's a thought that just popped up right now, it's a thought you've been carrying around since you were 10 years old, it's a thought that came up for you last week in the shower, something that your mother, father, sister, brother, bully on the schoolyard, they came in with one thought, and that was what we were going to work through together. And I can tell you that every single person I spoke to, yes, we all have the inner critic. Yes, we can tell ourselves we're this, that, and the other. But it was really powerful what these people felt safe enough to share with me about things that they have been walking around telling themselves some of it was just brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal,
Yeah.
And in as much as I certainly didn't see them that way, they saw themselves that way. And it's truly heartbreaking to think about what we tell ourselves, that we believe is true about ourselves, that we file away. And I say, be careful what you tell yourself, because you're going to stuff that into your subconscious. You're going to file that away about yourself. And the next thing you know, that becomes one of your core beliefs about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, I hope there was some catharsis at that table that day when people were, bringing these things up, and you represent at that table. I mean, this is we're getting Jungian here again. You represent that opportunity you're the catalyst for that change. Your book is the catalyst for that change. So what you just described to me should be a therapeutic model in itself.
Thank you for that. I have to say, I guess I have a it's not that I'm this altruistic, I'm not Mother Teresa, but I do feel very connected to compassion, having compassion for myself, having compassion for others. And I do, because of my own personal story to suffering and what I went through, it does make me feel even that much more compassionate to other people suffering. And if I can do something, which I believe says who, really does, and live true as well, if there's anything I can offer up to people to feel less alone or less tortured by their suffering, and to be able to find ways in which they can work through it in a much more, and I'm not talking about quick fix way. This isn't a quick fix. This isn't putting a Band-Aid on something. You have to be willing to do the work, going back to doing the work.
Right.
I'm asking you to do your work, and I'm offering you up techniques, methods, and skill sets that I think are going to be really useful to you. You want to make a chocolate cake? Here's a recipe. You want to stop suffering? Here's some ways in which you can stop suffering. That's what I offer up to people. And if you want it badly enough, there's help for you.
Yeah, you have to show up for it, but there's help. It's just like the cake. If you sit in the living room and everything's in the kitchen, you're not going to get the cake.
It's not going to get made, and then you're not going to enjoy the tasting of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Benefit from your creation. The one question I would like to ask, perhaps on behalf of the audience, what low-end age range would Says Who be appropriate for? Are we looking at mid-teens? What would you say would be good?
I've been asked that a lot, and Says Who's been used in so many different capacities with many different demographics and different age groups. I think that if you take the essence of the Says Who method, which is 7 cognitive questions to ask, I think you can start it as early as adolescence. You really can say that to a child. Tell me what you like about that thought. And they, or do you like that thought? And then you say, no, I don't like that thought. I don't like it at all. I've asked that question to many, many, many people where they've said to me, not only do I not like it, I hate it. And so to really introduce the concept, Justin, to even a young person, that they could change it. That's exciting for a young person's psyche to know that, it's like the monster in the closet, that wonderful children's book of like, you're at the effect of the fear that there's a monster in the closet. And so you basically invite that monster to your bed to sit on the edge of the bed, only to find out that the monster's more afraid than you are. That you actually are that powerful, because it's in our imagination. So if we're afraid of something, it's easy to project that outside of ourselves, and it can become a monster, not just in the closet, but it becomes a monster in our own minds. So I think the younger the better, because I do cite that in Says Who. I do talk about the very first time someone said something to you, and I think that if I've asked that question to thousands of people, that they have a defining memory, a defining moment memory of when the first time someone said something to them, be it a bully on the schoolyard, a teacher, a parent, a sibling, a stranger, where they felt like the wind just got knocked out of them. The first time something was said to you that you felt horrible. You're not good enough. You never be good at this. You're stupid. You never be good at sports. You're ugly. You're fat. You're this, you're that. I mean, terrible, terrible things that are said to us starting at a very young age. We know about bullying. Bullying is a very big problem. Children experience that all the time. And I do talk about that even in Says Who, about how you have to take that and turn that around, not to give that much power to someone outside of yourself, that you can turn around and say, Says who? Who said I'm that? Or who said I'm not this enough or that enough? To get that spine, to get that backbone, to know that that is your greatest recourse, that is your greatest weapon, to be able to challenge not only your own negative and fear-based thoughts, but anybody who's coming at you with it. That's empowering children to know that they have the ability to not take somebody else's bad words of them and take it on as real.
Absolutely.
But the thing I will say about that, Justin, is it's very, it's very telling when you see how many adults have taken those things, whether they told it to themselves or someone told it to them, and they've carried it for so long into adulthood. And they're still playing out that thought over and over again in their mind because they never knew that they had a right to challenge it and to change it.
Yeah.
They never knew they had that right to do that.
Mm-hmm. Reliving that psychic injury.
Exactly right.
Absolutely. So a parent or guardian can take this book and for whatever age range, use their sense to deliver it in an appropriate manner for anyone that, you know, where language is intelligible for them. So, you know, young children, they can process this into something that the child can work with.
Process it. They can actually write it down. I have a wonderful exercise that I do where I've done it in, you know, many workshops and places that I've spoken publicly where you write down one of your negative thoughts on a Post-it, crumple it up and throw it across the room. You know, that's cathartic for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And something for children to do, that they can crumple it up, they can rip it apart, they can flush it down the toilet.
Yeah.
Do you know? Put it in the garbage disposal with
a something dramatic, right?
Yeah, with a parent supervising it. Do you know,
yes.
That's a cathartic experience. Do you know? I mean, I stood on the stage in front of 250 young entrepreneurs when I had them write it down. The first thing they say is, "Can I write more than one?" And I say, "Write as many." And they would. I was standing on the stage. They crumpled up their negative thought, and they threw it across. I mean, some of the little pieces of paper like came on the stage. And then I said, write down its positive counterpart. Replace that thought with its positive counterpart. Do you want to crumple up that piece of paper and throw it? No. Yeah, why don't you take that positive counterpart thought and stick it on your mirror and look at it? You've thrown that piece of paper with that negative thought. Do you want to take that piece of paper back, uncrumple it, and put it back in your mind? No. A resounding no.
Right. Fill that vacuum with something good and put it up there. Beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful.
Right.
Says who, if you're watching this interview, this experience, give it a shot. Check it out. I want to cover the Institute for Transformational Thinking with you and move into that as our final segment of this, again, experience. I'm calling it now. It's not an interview anymore. It's an interview, but I'm loving it so much. It's an experience for me. So the Institute for Transformational Thinking, can you give us a rundown on what's going on with that?
Right. The Institute for Transformational Thinking, the IFTT, all my work really comes from that. The books, the workshops, and I also have an online course called the Thought Coach Certification Training Program. I mentioned to you that I was a life coach. I was a life coach for almost 12 years. When I became a certified life coach, there weren't a lot of us around. It was a very new niche of coaching.
Okay.
And so, you know, I put my shingle out, I became a life coach. And then when I wrote Says Who and did all the work around transformational thinking, which became my institute, I realized I'm a thought coach. A life coach always seems so broad to me. What exactly does a life coach do?
How do you coach something so global? You know?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and then I also saw like, oh, these young people are becoming life coaches, the operative word being life, do you know? And I thought, I'm a thought coach. I'm going in with people that come to me either with a thought, like I just described, that's really like wearing on them or nudging them or annoying them or causing them suffering, or they come in with an emotion. And as I say in Says Who, behind every emotion is a thought. We just sometimes need to locate it.
Okay.
You know, so I came up with a new niche of coaching. I'd like to call it the new life coach. And I created a whole new niche of coaching, which I think is pretty revolutionary, called the Thought Coach. So I created a complete online 4-module course called the Thought Coach Program. that is incredible. I've got almost 100 graduates from all over the world that are thought coaches. And it's very exciting to think that this whole new niche of coaching has emerged from my work, from the Says Who method. And a lot of my graduates are now becoming facilitators and helping others become certified as a
Okay.
thought coach.
Okay.
So the IFTT really is the institute where all of the work comes from, is from the Institute for Transformational Thinking. And my work is really all about transformation.
Here, here. Here, here. And you're a coach's coach too, aren't you? Did I read that correctly? That you work with people who are already coaching in some capacity, maybe a life coach or business coach?
I've had a lot of coaches, therapists, people that are in the coaching field, the wellness field, take my course, and and also done mindfulness coaching in the workplace. So whether it's a Says Who method of thought coaching or it's mindfulness coaching, those are the two areas of coaching that I do. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, it's just, I love that it's just gone international. To think of thought coaches all over the world really excites me.
Right. And it's your baby. It's something you did, which
It
is awesome.
I mean, it really is, Justin, because like I said, I mean, life coaching, it's even when I think back to when I put my shingle out and I call myself a life coach, I never really resonated with that title, if you will. I mean, even in as much as I made it my own type of coaching, and I was successful at it, now really defining it as a thought coach, that I can go in and really work with you with, like, what are the thoughts that are impeding, getting in your way, sabotaging, undermining. We all have them. Knowing that I can work with people directly with those thoughts is like going to the root of the problem. I mean, it's fine if you want someone coaching you on and cheering you on and you can do this, it's great. But once you're out of the picture, a lot of the times, that's why I think I don't write just motivational books. I give you techniques. I give you skill sets.
Yeah.
I give you tools to use. I don't want to just lift you up so that you go on your merry way and then crash and go, what do I do again? So the thought coaching model is really great because you can work with people with their thoughts. They can learn how to work with their own thoughts. I'm not, I'm all for talk therapy. I think it's great. I experienced it myself. But the times that we're in right now, I want to give people the tools and the skill sets so they don't have to depend on me to lift them up every day. When you have the ability to lift yourself up, when you have the ability to transform your own thoughts, that excites me so much to know that I'm teaching you these methods so that you can feel empowered about your own thinking mind. That excites me. Right. It's not about you sitting in an office with me just on the hamster wheel, just talking about the same old problems over and over again. It's going nowhere. I mean, some people just want to be listened to. That's fine. But I'm into solution-oriented, transformational experiences. You use the word, this is an experience. I'm all for the transformational experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. And solution-oriented is something I like as well. I try to use that. Sometimes I'm critical of people because I'll see things happening and it's like, let's look at this from a solution-oriented or through a lens of solution-oriented thinking, as opposed to confrontational and adversarial thinking. Let's figure out where we can find a solution in this.
Taking just that one concept of the release and replace technique, when I am working with people that hands crossed, resistant, skeptical, or what I call in Says Who, the yeah buts. Yeah, but I don't have time for that. Yeah, but I don't know. Those kind of things don't work for me. Yeah, but I just, it's the skeptical or the skeptic who doesn't even want to try it. And when I just say, let's just take that thought, that negative thought, and replace it with its positive counterpart. And even if they're like, okay, there's resistance to doing it. And I say, or ask them, how does that feel in your body? If you were sitting there and saying to yourself, I'm never going to be happy, or something good is never going to happen for me, or I'm never going to be successful, or I'm unlovable. And you replace that with, I am lovable.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to realize success in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I do deserve good things to happen for me. When you just say that, and I say to people or ask them, tell me how that feels in your body. The difference between telling yourself you're not enough and then now telling yourself you are enough. Talk about experiential.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's undeniable.
Sure.
It's undeniable that energetically letting go of that negative toxic energy and replacing it with positive energy, you're going to feel it somatically. You're going to feel it in your body.
Yeah.
And when you start to like that feeling enough, when you start to say, you know what, I kind of like that better, because, a lot of people have only known how to suffer, and that's all they've known. That's all they're familiar with. They might not know how to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
And once you try these new ways of thinking and start to feel differently and actually grow to like it and love it, that's when, that aha moment happens and the realization takes place. And it's a really beautiful thing.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the old adage comes to mind, and I'll revise it for the 21st century. Teach a person to grow a sweet potato rather than just feeding them a sweet potato. So, teach a person to fish. We'll change it. Well, you could grow a sweet. Yeah, I could set a hot sweet potato in front of you, but let's go out and learn how to grow a whole bunch of.
And these are tools that everybody can, these are tools that everybody can apply.
Yeah.
This isn't rocket science. You don't have to be a physicist to do this. Do you know what I mean? This is doable. This is doable for everyone. And you mentioned age. These are techniques. These are skill sets that everybody can use. Mm-hmm. All that you need to do is one thing. Want to.
Yeah. The motivation.
That's right.
The motivation. And that's, I'll come back to something I said in the beginning, that your book Live True is informative and it's accessible at the same time. So it's not off-putting. I've read self-help and transformational books, and there's a lot of jargony things going on, and they invoke sciencey things and this and that. And, it's not, it's another aspect of learning, but what you deliver is accessible. And I like that.
Thank you. I call it user-friendly, and it's accessible. And some people like to come in the more difficult road. They want a lot of twists and turns and bumps and, the circuitous route. Make it difficult for me. I don't do well with easy or straight lines. You got to make it difficult for me. Right. I'm not that author teacher. I'm not here to make it difficult for you. Yeah. There's plenty of difficulty in life as it is. We don't need to pile it on. Do you know? Mm-hmm. My thing is to lighten your load. My thing is it's to tell you an easier way to get to Rome. Mm-hmm. It's really what I'm offering up to you. If you want it more difficult, if you want it more painful, if you want to suffer a little bit more, there's plenty of ways to do that. That's just not what my teachings are about.
Yeah, absolutely. And humans tend to complexify things and want complexity, and that slips into the appeal to authority. So if, again, people want this complicated narrative and as you said,
there's plenty of that.
Yeah, and it's entertaining, and it stimulates the mind a little bit, but it's just sort of a intellectual indulgence where, again, accessibility and user friendliness gets results, and you can then move into other things. If you want to go ahead and go down that road, you can certainly do that.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I've had a lot of people break down in front of my eyes with their aha moment. They're, we're like, they can't believe. I'm not saying that it's this easy, but they can't believe that they can get from here to here by doing this and this and this. It's like, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. And it's really just applying yourself, committing yourself, again, wanting to change, that when you sign on to do that, or you subscribe to my methodologies and you start to see the results. I mean, I've had so many people say to me, my God, I used to be such a negative person. I can't believe I'm really not that negative anymore. I used to be a really negative, constantly doomsday kind of person, always seeing what could go wrong, always thinking the worst. I mean, if anything, you really are neuroscientifically changing the brain. You know, the whole neuroplasticity, and that our brains are always changing. We're creating new habits of thinking. We're defaulting to new ways of thinking as opposed to old patterns of thinking. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's much more expansive. It's much more liberating, if you will.
Yep, absolutely. And I think in terms of our diversity as a species, as a cultural species, as a social species, that it is absolutely essential that the message be delivered in a palatable manner, and that people can do the work and get started on it. And again, you know, persons like yourself and there's other people that I've met that are, I think there's a shift showing up right now where people are realizing that. You've realized that. I've talked to other people who are doing similar work, and it's stripping down, simplifying, but not at any expense. It's not throwing anything away. In fact, it's enriching things more. When parsimony comes into play, it can be more easily applied. So again, you know, it's like putting on clothing. You know, you can put on the clunky knight of armor kind of thing with a lot of chainmail, or you can just have something very casual that you can flow with a lot more easily.
Yeah, I mean,
if that's a good analogy.
You can really ask yourselves that. You know, that's a personal question. You know, do you want to make it more difficult on yourself than needs be? You really don't need to. There are a lot of things that we can do. You know, you have to ask yourself, what are your feelings about change? Is change frightening to you? Is it scary to change? Do you not feel ready to change? Do you feel ready to change? And when you feel ready to change, I think you're much more open to receiving these types of skill sets and methods and technologies, if you will, that can really help support that in you. So I think that those are, again, the taking our own spiritual pulse. Am I really ready to change? And if I am, I mean, even with the Says Who method, I really commend anybody to take that first step, because I say the very first question of the Says Who method is, says who? Who is saying this thought in my mind? You know, I commend anybody who's taking that first step to change, you know, because it does take that courage, that honesty, that willingness in ourselves to step forward and say, you know what, I'm really ready to change those thoughts. I'm really ready to experience a change in my life. What do I have to do to make that happen?
Those are beautiful words, right? When you hear that from someone.
Yeah.
And how wonderful would it be if they could do that in a state of normalcy, whereas we had talked about the dark night earlier and the provocation that sometimes is necessary through an incident or a dramatic event in your life. But if you can, and I'm saying this to people listening, if you are in a relative state of normalcy and not a lot of drama going on around you in terms of things happening to you, start the process now and move into that and pick up work that Ora has done and other folks are doing, and start that, because it's a great motivational tool to be shocked into that mode of inquiry that you're talking about. But it's also, there's a gentle way to do it too. So.
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah. So, you know, you want to like be aware, again, the mindful awareness of do it with acceptance, non-judgment, and self-love. Be more forgiving. You know, keep those in mind. This isn't a journey about making yourself feel worse. This is a journey about making yourself feel better. So, you know, go easy on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any things, speaking of the present and the future, that you would like to share with us that you are working on project-wise, that you want to share right now, or?
Well, also have a journey, a journal, which is a companion to Live True. I have a Live True daily journal, which also came out this. It was really exciting to just create that during the pandemic last year. So I'm doing a workshop actually starting this Thursday. There's still a couple of spots available. So I'm doing the Live True Daily Journal workshop starting April 15th. So people can go onto my website, oranadrich.com, if they want to take that journey. It's 2 hours, 4 o'clock on Thursday, Pacific Standard Time. And the book is really broken down into 8 weeks, because that's a good enough time to really solidify the habits on the authentic self journey. So that's coming up soon. I have a new book that I'm super excited about that's going to be coming out probably mid-year, and I'll keep you posted on that. Okay. A lot of amazing things that are going to come out of that book that I'm very excited to begin the conversation on that. And then the Thought Coach program is evergreen for anybody who is interested in learning more about the Thought Coach program. You can go to oranadrich.com. And more to come.
Wow. I'm so looking forward to the new book. We had, before we started this conversation, as it is being recorded, you had given me a little insight into it, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think that's totally in the field that I'm interested. So I am looking forward to that. And Ora, I am so grateful for the time that we spent together. This was for me an incredible experience / interview. And again, I want to express my gratitude to you for being present with me in this conversation, for sharing your work with everyone. And I know that I like to say this in these conversations, that this little thing we've created is going to have a life of its own. It's going to be out there in the world, and I see it enriching people's lives by way of introduction to possibility and possibilities for change and transformation. So I want to honor this experience and this interview by just, again, saying thank you. I really appreciate the time we've spent together.
And thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this was really, it was fulfilling in a good, hearty way. It was fulfilling.
Yeah,
so I appreciate the experience. And I will have all the information for people to find you. You mentioned your website. I am going to have all of that information available in the description of this video. So that will be accessible. I will have links for people to be able to, I know they can find it through your website, but to access your books so that people can just have a quick link out because I want them to go and discover the work that you've created by way of your books. It's what's, this may sound smug, but it's what's important right now, I think, and perhaps even what's needed in some people's lives. So, the discovery starts here. Go check out Ora's books, if you will, and or at least go to her website and scroll about a bit and have a few moments with her website. So you won't be sorry. And I know this conversation, if you're still here listening, this conversation was a good place to start as well. So. So I'm going to stop the record in a moment, and you and I can say goodbye offline or off record or whatever it is. But again, thank you to everyone who was participating and listening in and watching this and experiencing this with us. And again, Ora, thank you so much. I will look forward to perhaps discussing the new book, and we can have another conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Justin.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to stop record. Again, I will thank everyone who joined us in this conversation on YouTube, and I bid you all a good day. And again, have a wonderful discovery with Ora's work. So again, Ora, I bid you well, and we'll say goodbye after I stop the recording here, which I will do now. Ciao, everyone.